Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Troutdale Planning Commission for Wednesday, March 8th, 2023. If we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wydilla,
Will not be here this evening.
Commissioner Leamy,
Here.
Commissioner Prickett,
Here.
Commissioner Wilcock,
Here.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Chair Tanny, or is Chair Stephenson,
Here.
and recognizing Chair Commissioner Andrews.
Here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, at this time, I would like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will be leading this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
One
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go any further, we have a new individual up this evening, and this is Zach Andrews, who was the Planning Commission alternate, and he's taking over the position vacated by Jordan Wittrin, who is now on City Council. And with that, there's one other order of business that I want to do before we do non-agenda comment, and that would be Jordan served as vice chair, and so we need to fulfill that position through the end of June. And at this time, I would accept nominations for the position of vice chair for the Planning Commission. Okay.
I second.
I was going to nominate one of you two.
So submit a motion to nominate Shirley.
Shirley.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. So are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, so we'll close the nominations and then we will vote first on Rich Allen for vice chair. Okay, 1, 2. Send me do this to you on purpose.
Yeah.
And for Shirley Prickett as vice chair. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
All right. We won.
Okay. All right. So Shirley Prickett will serve as vice chair for the Planning Commission. Thank you. And at this time,
Chair, did you get Mr. Wilcox?
I did not. I'm sorry.
Oh, he's in here. No, come on. Jack.
Paul, I forgot about you. I'm sorry.
I vote for Shirley.
Okay. Thank you for making that easy for me. All right. With that, at this time, is there anyone wishing to make comment to the Planning Commission this evening on a non-agenda item? No, you guys are all agenda item people. Okay. Anyone online wishing to comment? No?
No reaction.
Okay. All right. With that, we will go ahead and move into tonight's item. Right, do you have anything else before we do that?
No,
Go
sir.
right to the beat of it. Okay. Yeah, tonight. We have case file 7102, City Troutdale Parks Master Plan. This is a type 4 legislative hearing. And before we open the public hearing for this item, I'd like to explain a little bit about the Planning Commission and the procedures that we'll be following this evening. Planning Commission is an appointed 7-member volunteer body of Troutdale citizens. Members of the Planning Commission are Troutdale residents who've been appointed by the City Council. They serve 4-year terms. They are strictly volunteers and receive no pay for their services. Planning Commission serves as a citizen committee for the review of land use applications and various land use related matters within the city. Items which the Planning Commission consider include uses of land, subdivisions, major variances, land use policy plans, and development regulations. For some land use applications, the planning commission makes a final decision, and for other applications, they're making a recommendation to the city council who renders the final decision. This application this evening is a type 4 hearing, so the planning commission will be making a recommendation to the city council who will render the final decision. Hearing procedures are held in accordance with Oregon law and procedures contained in the Troutdale Development Code. Hearing proceeds as follows. City staff presents their report, which includes applicable criteria and standards for the matter under consideration in land use applications. All testimony and evidence should be directed towards these criteria. If you believe that other criteria, the comprehensive plan, development code, or other city land use regulations apply, you must identify these criteria and explain why they apply to the decision. Planning Commission accepts public testimony relating to the application. An opportunity will be provided to anyone testifying to clarify any issues raised. All issues raised by a participant during the public hearing must be sufficiently clear and specific to allow the Planning Commission and other parties an opportunity to respond to those issues. Failure to raise an issue during this public hearing may invalidate a future appeal based on that issue. Prior to closing the public hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding this application. If that happens, the Planning Commission must grant the request by either continuing the public hearing to a future date or by leaving the record open for at least 7 days to admit specific additional written evidence or testimony. If the record is left open for additional written evidence or testimony, any participant may file a written request for an opportunity to respond to new evidence submitted during the period the record was left open. If such a request is filed, the Planning Commission shall reopen the record to allow any person to raise new issues which relate to new evidence, testimony, or criteria for decision making. As a reminder, this is a type 4 hearing, and the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to City Council. As a final note, when you came in, there's a sign-up sheet on the table. Please sign in so we know you're here. We can send you mail and all sorts of stuff after this. And if you plan on testifying this evening, please fill out one of these cards. Okay, so we have your information for the record. And when you testify, please speak up because these hearings are televised and recorded, and we want to make sure that we catch everything that you have to contribute to the meeting. And is there anyone that has any conflict of interest they need to declare before we open the public hearing? No?
Chair Stephenson.
Yes,
I tried to get some information out of my wife, but she refused.
she did.
Yeah, she's on the Parks Committee. So I'm hoping to hear from Parks members that are on the audience.
She wouldn't tell you anything?
No. I don't know if she can or she can't, but she can. Check it pretty closely.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm one of the little parks that's mentioned in here is like within 250 feet of my house. I'm just saying it's there.
That's a good thing. You probably frequent.
A lot.
And this is Zach. I obviously am also on the Parks Advisory Committee, as we're stating. Ties to that, no personal conflict.
All right. No issues with anyone? Okay. Sounds like we're ready to proceed. Okay, with that, you ready?
Yes.
We're going to go ahead now and open the public hearing for case file 71-02, City of Troutdale Parks Master Plan. Do you want to do the staff report and then do public comment?
Your call, Chair. Yeah, that works fine for us. Whatever you like to,
Okay.
whatever you'd like to do is works for us.
Yeah, so let's just do the staff report and then we'll take comment. All right.
Good evening, Chair Stephenson, fellow planning commissioners. I'm David Berniker, Director of Community Development. We're here to review the City of Troutdale Park Master Plan. I'm joined by John Phoenix, who's a principal at MIG Planning and our day-to-day consultant on the project. Tim Siri is also here from the city. Tim has served as the project manager on the project since May of 2021. In this capacity, Tim organized town hall meetings, developed questions for online surveys, attended First Friday events, community open houses at Troutdale Elementary School. Tim has run a very transparent and community-oriented process. I also wanted to recognize Melissa Johnston, who played a role in the development and coordination of the project. The Parks Master Plan is a long-term plan for the city of Troutdale's park and recreation system. So the review procedures for tonight, the comprehensive land use plan and master plan updates are required to undergo a type 4 legislative procedure in which the Troutdale Planning Commission may recommend approval or denial of the application to Troutdale City Council, which is the decision-making entity. The draft Parks Master Plan was posted on, so for some background testimony received, the draft Parks Master Plan was posted online for review January 10th to January 29th, 2023. The public was invited to provide written comment through an online form available on the city's website, along with the draft Parks Master Plan and appendices. A comments matrix is provided, which identifies comments received and how they were addressed. All of this brings me to the staff recommendation. Planning Commission is asked to recommend that City Council adopt the City of Troutdale Parks Master Plan and adopt an update to Goal 8 of the statewide comprehensive land use plan goals, which requires local governments to plan for recreation needs of their residents and visitors. I will now turn it over to John Phoenix from MIG to make the formal presentation. John?
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, for having us here tonight. I'm honored to talk about this project with you tonight. We're very excited to present all of what we've done, a lot of great information. And so, yeah, happy to be here. My name is John Phoenix. I'm a principal with MIG. We're a interdisciplinary planning and design firm here in Portland. And as David mentioned, we have been working on this project for quite a while. Back in May 2021 is when we got started. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get my presentation up and running. So tonight, I've got a few things I'd like to cover. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review the plan. I will be stepping through each chapter. I'm going to talk about how it was created, how the community was directly involved, and then what some of the recommendations and outcomes of this plan are, and in particular, what this means for Planning Commission. So we'll talk about the plan purpose and the process, talk a little bit about existing conditions, just an overview really. Really want to focus on how the city of Troutdale involved the community into this planning process. This is a community-driven plan. It's very important to keep that in mind as we talk about what this plan entails. And that ties into the key needs and the future vision. This is a long-term plan. This is a system-wide plan. So think in terms of the transportation system, the stormwater system, the sewer system. Parks are a big part of the city system. So that's what we're considering tonight. I'll talk about recommendations in the plan, phasing, what should happen first based on what we heard from the community and the Parks Advisory Committee, and then plan implementation and next steps in the planning process. So when we started this project over a year ago, these are the goals that we set out to achieve. Number one, involving the community of Troutdale. As I mentioned, this is a plan for the people of Troutdale, for the city, to provide guidance for parks and recreation. We had a goal to balance growth with character. You know, Troutdale is growing, it has been growing. And as new people come online, it's really important to consider how does that impact quality of life for local residents and impacts to the park system. We had a goal to assess park and recreation economics. We get a lot of tourists and visitors to Troutdale. That has a direct impact on spending, on the downtown economy, and all the great parks and recreation facilities that people come to see in Troutdale. we had a goal to prioritize funding and financing options. You'll find throughout this plan and throughout the process I'll talk about tonight, everybody has an idea and a need for what they'd like to see. So this process was really important to find out what should happen first and how do we pay for that. And lastly, a big goal was to build partner support and consensus. So community partners, talking with schools, talking with the metro government, all of those entities were important to hear from in development of this plan. One other big component of this process, another goal, is considering park access and equity. So I have the definitions that we use throughout this process as a guide. What exactly do those mean? These two definitions we use come out of the National Recreation and Parks Association. It's a nationwide organization that helps local park agencies. So I have the definitions up here. I just wanted to highlight on what these two terms mean and what they mean for this process. Access, of course, it's important to consider how people in Troutdale get to parks and recreation facilities. How close are some of these things? How far away are they? Where are some places that don't have great access? And then equity, looking at welcoming, culturally relevant, welcoming, I said that twice, but that's really important. That's really what we're striving to achieve. Parks and public spaces that are safe, places that people want to go and feel safe and welcoming in. So the planning process, we mentioned starting back in 2021, we had a 4-phase process. So we kind of stepped through each step one at a time. Beginning in the summer of 2021, we did a tour of all the parks. Tim was there. Really great to hear from somebody that has that amount of expertise that Tim has to describe conditions, what the system is facing. We updated the park inventory, did some mapping, and then talked with council about what they'd like to see for this parks plan. In fall and winter of 2021, we really kicked off the public facing side of this process. We had a survey, we had in-person and online activities to hear from the community. And then we had check-ins with the advisory committee, again, another meeting with council. Then last year, we put the recommendations into place. We developed the vision and goals based on what we heard from the community. We developed site recommendations, the capital improvement plan, and then launched another survey, online survey, to hear about what priorities are out in the community for this plan. So that brings us to this winter. Here we are putting the plan together, talking about the plan that hopefully you've had a chance to review. We had discussion in a meeting with the Parks Advisory Committee to hear their ideas on this plan, the Planning Commission tonight, and upcoming City Council meetings for adoption. So let's talk a little bit about existing conditions. And I'm not going to go into too much detail just for sake of time. But the point here is that Troutdale is land constrained. We know we've got urban growth on all sides. We've got Sandy River, the Columbia River. We've got transportation networks. We've got the freeway I-84. We've got topography. We've got wetlands. We've got creeks. We've got steep slopes. So there are a lot of constraints to consider, but a lot of great opportunities. Troutdale has some excellent parks. This map is the existing system. So you can see all the green shapes there, the park system. And the table at the right shows you all the different park types. So we classify parks by how they serve, how they function, how do people use parks in a different way. That's important for a number of reasons. So many parks, neighborhood parks, community parks, 12 total developed parks in Troutdale, totaling almost 70 acres. And then a few special use areas, over 100 acres of natural areas, open space, and then an undeveloped park as well. So 22 total sites and 183 acres. We looked at how the community is growing and the community composition. So the table at left is looking at future growth. This is a long-term plan. So we're thinking not just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years into the future, we're looking 20 years down the road. And of course, nobody can see that far into the future. So what we did was look at future growth projections, and these are based off of local PSU forecasts for 2040. So we looked at future growth. What does that mean? How fast are we growing? We also looked at composition of the community. We looked at race and ethnicity. We know, for example, in Troutdale on the graph on right, You can see that Troutdale has a higher Hispanic Latino population than the county average. So we know that's important to consider as well. So all those factors, population growth, and there are a few other demographic indicators that I'll show you here in a second when we look at some of the park access maps. So let's talk a little bit about how we involve the community. What did we hear? So this is a list of everything that we did over this 1.5 years with the city. We had, as I mentioned, both in-person and online opportunities. Obviously, when we started this process, we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic. So the online opportunities were very helpful in providing safe connections to hear from the community. But as you can see the image at right, this was last summer's First Fridays events in downtown. So a great opportunity to hear from families, kids, all sorts of folks. We had meetings with council, as I mentioned. We had 2 questionnaires, as I said, one early on, one just recently. We had over 600 respondents in total to those 2 questionnaires. So overall, great turnout. We had an event at the elementary school. And then most recently, we had comments received on the draft plan from the city's website on the comment form. So lots of different ways we heard from the community. And the idea here is there's no one opportunity or even 2 that we hang our hat on and say, here's what we heard. The goal is to really have a well-rounded set of activities, opportunities to make sure we're hearing from as many people as possible and to give as many as possible opportunities as we can. So just a couple of examples of some of the things that we heard. This was an image from the first online survey. And we asked, what are some of the qualities that are most important to you and your family? And this is really helpful to start us to understand what are we planning for? What are some of the things that people are most interested in? So you can see the top response here was people are really interested in nature. So connecting to nature. Troutdale has a lot of amazing natural amenities, both in the city and just outside the city. Access to rivers, access to wild spaces. So very important, but also so are active spaces. So play areas, places to gather, places to have fun, places to have recreation programs, events, comfortable spaces, and then a variety. And you'll see this throughout the presentation and the plan. So a little bit more about what we heard and what the vision is for the future for the park system. As I mentioned, we did a lot of analysis early on and throughout the process. We did an inventory update. And after that, we looked at, okay, how are parks situated throughout the city? So if you have a plan view of Troutdale, where are some great places that have good access to parks? And where are some places that don't? So this map on the right, the darker the dark shapes are showing you developed parks in Troutdale. And then the yellow shape shows you about a 1/4 mile walking distance from that park. And then the lighter shade green is further out about a 1/2 mile. So anywhere in those shades, generally speaking, you could have a pretty close walk to a park. But just outside of that, those white spaces, there really isn't a good access to developed parkland. Maybe there's a natural area, but that doesn't mean that you can use it, or that doesn't mean you have safe access to get there. There's another part of Troutdale that I think everybody is very familiar with, which is the predominantly non-residential portion of Troutdale to the north. So that's obviously underserved to the north. So I mentioned we looked at park access and equity. So these 4 maps show a series of some of the analysis we did based on demographic factors. So from left to right, we looked at residential density, so number of residents per square mile. These are all census blocks. So that's essentially the smallest unit we could get down to look at this information. We looked at communities of color. So this is percent of folks in Troutdale that are non-white. That's the kind of bluish purple map. Second to the left, we looked at percentage of folks in Troutdale that are low income. Another key variable, keeping in mind affordability being a factor in this plan. And then the map on the far right, we looked at the youth population. Where are some patterns and concentrations of folks that are young in Troutdale? We also looked at differences and variations throughout the city. Obviously, if someone says they are interested in something or need something, that doesn't represent the entire community. So we looked at responses in the first and second survey online based on where respondents live. So this map shows different colors based on the different neighborhoods in Troutdale. So I just thought this was interesting. We asked, if we had more money, if the city had more money, where would you like to see that spent? What would the top priorities be? So a common theme is reinvesting in existing assets. So repairing, replacement of worn facilities, top priority. Adding more variety in existing parks, another top priority. And then maintenance. That's something that we heard a lot about. Increasing maintenance, taking care of what we have. That was a top priority. So those are all some commonalities throughout the city, a little different depending on the neighborhood. But really, I think we heard loud and clear, there's an interest in doing more with what we have, taking care of what we have. So some key needs. Based on everything we heard, that list of different opportunities that we had hearing from the community, the analysis that we did, what are some of the things that we found? The first is a need for 2 to 3 new parks. So these are future parks that don't exist today in Troutdale. And this is based on the access analysis that we did, looking at underserved areas, as well as a level of service standards that the city has. And that's an indicator of acres per thousand, so number of park acreage per thousand population. So 3 different locations that we identified as having the greatest need for new park space. This is Northwest Troutdale near Halsey, the South Central area near Southeast Stark, and then in South Troutdale near Mount Hood Community College. So just some example images on the right showing existing parks on the top, and then a precedent example of a built park in a different community, kind of showing the potential. Some other key needs: activating and maintaining parks. Just talked a lot about maintenance being critical, having more to do in Troutdale parks. Safety was a big one. Safe connections, interconnected trails, getting off busy streets, being able to walk or bike to get around. And then supporting downtown. We gleaned a lot from the downtown plan, as well as conversations that we had with folks about how important downtown is to the quality of life, having a lot to do, having a place to get down to, and then making those connections to downtown. And then lastly, having great places to play. A lot of people think of play areas, with swing sets, things really for small kids, really little kids. But what we heard is, and the trends throughout the state of Oregon are really having more for all different age groups: kids, teens, tweens, young adults. And that means different types of facilities and amenities depending on which parks that you have. Inclusive park and recreation opportunities, thinking more about culturally representative opportunities, signage, art, and then increasing access to nature. So more trails, bringing more nature into existing parks. That was a big key need. So the future vision. So thinking about all those needs, that's quite a laundry list. What does the community envision for the next 20 years in Troutdale for parks and recreation? So I have the 7 planning goals that we propose in the parks plan, and I'm just going to highlight these. I know you have those in front of you to read. But the first is variety. So I mentioned this, some of this is kind of a broken record. Having more variety in parks and recreation opportunities. So not just a one-size-fits-all, not having the same thing everywhere. Encouraging community participation and stewardship. So we heard a lot about people wanting to do more, in some cases, people not knowing what exists. Maybe you're new to the community. How do they find out about some of these opportunities? Safe and enjoyable natural areas, preserving wildlife habitat, ecological functions, opportunities for education and interpretive opportunities. Interconnected trail system, and I'll talk more about this in just a minute. Again, connectivity being really important. It's important in Troutdale. It's one of the top needs in the state of Oregon, so we know it's a need for the city. Safety, accessibility, inclusive spaces, maintenance I mentioned, and then finally keeping an eye on diversity of funding sources. So not just having one funding source to pay for everything, relying on a broader range of opportunities, including partnerships. Okay, so let's talk about this future system, going from what we heard from the community, the future vision, to now the recommendations and then phasing. So the plan has a whole range of recommendations, and these are the 5 topics that we organize those in: planning and administration, park improvements and design. So thinking about planning and design of parks, system-wide recommendations around nature, trails, open space, operations and maintenance, and then programs and events. And this really does encapsulate all the different areas that Parks and Recreation in Troutdale is responsible for providing. So we want to think about this holistically. It is comprehensive. That's why we have these 5 different topics. So the capital projects, what will this system look like? So the plan provides a map showing the future park system. And as I've explained previously, we've got both improvements projects to existing parks, and those are shown off on the right on this map. You can see the list of existing parks. Those little icons indicate what type of project it is, and then future parks as well. So a little bit more about those categories. Obviously, reinvestment in existing parks is important. So a lot of the parks have some kind of project proposed that would reinvest or renew. So that includes things like new pathways, accessible pathways, play area enhancements, court resurfacing. Another category, preserving and connecting the system. So this has more to do with natural area improvements, connections within parks and to parks. So things like habitat restoration, new and improved signage, and then implementing a lot of the trail system projects identified in the city's transportation system plan. And I've got a second map that I'll show you here in just a second. And then lastly, expanding and accommodating. We talked about the economy and how big of a role Parks and Recreation plays in Troutdale's local economy. Tourism, obviously a big part of that. The gateway to the gorge, the Sandy River, the Columbia River, just all sorts of opportunities. So there's a disc golf course currently. The recommendation is to find a permanent home for the disc golf course, trailheads, a new skate park. These are all things that obviously community members like to see and would like to use, but also ways to expand and accommodate the system. For future parks, we have 3 new sites, the Sandy River Greenway and Trail, a future community park, as I mentioned, and a new neighborhood park along Halsey. Another side to the future system is trails. So we have a separate map in the plan focusing exclusively on trail projects. This plan is very helpful in the sense that it combines what we heard from the community, what trails, what connections were important, with the identified transportation system planning projects the city's already identified. So some examples here are shown on your map. Got a couple listed here. We've got a few that are highlighted on the map as projects. These are off-street trails identified in the transportation system plan that we heard from the community as being a priority. So this is another way to elevate those projects in the park system plan that have already been identified by the city. All right, just a few more slides here on project priorities. So maintenance, we know, is a big need. We looked at existing maintenance costs. We looked at existing maintenance staffing and workloads, and provided an updated maintenance cost list based on park types. So the plan talks about a hierarchy of maintenance needs based on the type of park. So everything from a developed park that gets a lot of use to a natural space that may get little to no use. So those both and everything in between have different maintenance needs. So this table at right from the plan shows the list of proposed costs for maintenance to maintain the park system. The plan also talks about maintenance needed for those future parks that I mentioned and trails that would be added to the system as well. So priorities, I just wanted to highlight how important this is. This was the second survey we did asking we had this laundry list of different projects. What really needs to happen first? So again, some differences by neighborhood depending on where you are in Troutdale, but a lot of commonalities as well. So in areas with park deficit, areas that don't have great access to parks, we saw a priority to add parkland. So you can see top left of the screen, town center, west of 257th, priority to build or add new parks. Similarly, in the south portion of Troutdale, a need for new parks as well. So the priority project list, this is the proposed short-term, by short-term, we consider this as the 5-year capital project list recommended in the plan to take on first. So we have the full 20-year capital improvement plan that's in the appendix to this plan. Within this section, we talk about what needs to happen first. What are those priorities? So this is the list of those priorities that we recommend taking place in the next 5 years. So what's interesting about this list, what we show, if you look to the far right, we identify if these projects have been identified elsewhere. And it turns out they have. So you can see the Public Works Capital Improvement Plan. A number of these projects, nearly all of them actually, have been identified for funding within the Public Works CIP, excuse me. And then when we were putting this together, we were still referencing the 2021-2022 citywide budget. So a number of these park improvements were identified in that budget. Not shown in this table are a number of additional park improvement projects identified in the recent city budget. So those are the off-leash dog park in Columbia Park, pathway improvements, the skate park also in Columbia Park, and the Beaver Creek Bridge replacement. So again, just something to consider. These were prioritized based on our survey that we heard from folks. And a lot of these have already been identified by the city, either from Public Works or the citywide budget. So I'm almost finished here. I know I've been going through a lot, but I do want to just highlight implementation steps. What is it going to take to implement this plan and to get things done? What are the next steps? So the first, and what we have presented to you tonight, is updating the city's comprehensive plan, specifically Goal 8. And we proposed in the packet tonight a update to that section of the comprehensive plan based on the Parks Master Plan. So you'll see the same goals and objectives from the Parks Plan reflected in the updates to Goal 8 for the city's comprehensive plan. The second is amending the capital improvement project list using decision-making criteria in the plan. So common for all park systems, there's always going to be somebody coming up asking about something. Can we add this? This new sport just came up. Can we add this to the park system? It's a common thing I see in many communities. So what's really helpful in this plan is to have some sort of agreement, some sort of questions to ask, either with the Parks Advisory Committee or as a city to decide what's really right for the city based on what we've heard about in the plan. Promotional campaign, that's really important. That was something I mentioned we heard about a lot, is really showcasing just how many great assets, just how many great parks, recreation programs, events the city offers. That really is helpful and goes a long way, especially in terms of long-term sustainability for the park system. Thinking about future funding, volunteering opportunities, you name it. This is very critical. Interdepartmental collaboration, something the city already does. We recommend continuing that, if not strengthening those opportunities. Planning, parks, public works, everything going on at the city level deserves to be heard. This is critical for plan implementation, especially when thinking about how we move some of these projects forward. So keeping this plan at the front of the table to make sure it is implemented. Grant funding opportunities. I didn't mention this earlier in the presentation. We talk about it in the plan, but this plan is critical for grant funding opportunities, for achieving grant funding. So the vision, the inventory, the needs assessment, these are things that agencies like Oregon State Parks is looking for when they look at who's being competitive for funding. Increasing staffing, we recommend staffing increase to not only keep up with future parklands identified in this plan, but also increasing maintenance workload. You'll see in the plan, we identify a comparison, city of Troutdale versus the national average based on a comparable size community. Really looking at bringing that full-time equivalent employee staffing for maintenance higher based on existing workload and then future workload. Pursuing acquisition and development opportunities. I think the Depot Park, Sandy River Greenway is a perfect example of what's possible. We know that there are not a lot of undeveloped lands in Troutdale, but this plan really provides the starting point to start looking for that next site for acquisition. And then lastly, I think this is something that is important for the Planning Commission to consider when you have development applications, different requests coming towards you, really using this plan as a tool, thinking about those future growth areas, future parks, park needs. That's important. But this isn't a one and done type project. This plan will continue to change based on community needs, based on the growth of the community. So using that decision-making criteria to consider what's new, what's changing, what are some things we're hearing that may be different than they were in 2023, just like they are now when we look at the last plan that was done in 2006. Okay, last slide I have is kind of what we're talking about tonight and then next steps. So tonight, as David mentioned in the staff report, the decision criteria is a type 4 review. And so the staff report talks about some findings specifically to the development code and the review procedure for this type 4 review process. We have in the packet recommended amendments to goal 8 in the comprehensive plan. And so we're recommending adoption for the Parks Master Plan and related the proposed amendments to the City of Troutdale Comprehensive Plan Goal 8. As a next step, the next series of meetings will be with City Council. The first reading will be on April 11th, and a second reading will take place on May 9th. So with that, I'll end my presentation and turn it back over to you.
You, Chair. All right. Any questions for staff?
Are people that are here tonight able to speak on this?
Yeah. Good to hear from you next. All right. And with that, we can go ahead and start hearing from the public.
Should I read it or to have?
Sure.
Okay, this is from Sherry Winter.
Do they want to come up?
Sherry, did you, I think at the,
This is, I'm against the where I will speak. Do you need to do the proponents first?
No, we're just taking them.
Comments, okay.
Yeah,
Okay to be here?
you're fine. Thank you, Chair.
thank you. Thank you.
I first have a question. Page 3 in the document, it says something about Troutdale being more racially diverse than the state. I was trying to figure out where that information comes from.
Okay.
Kenny, would you like us to answer that? And when I said it has something, mostly referring to John, but do you want us to
Yeah.
respond to that now?
No. Just go ahead and fire them all out. and we'll-
Okay, so that was my question. It would have maybe meant another comment to go along with it, but, okay, so there's some good ideas in this plan, but, oh yeah, you already said that, so. But I can't give this stamp, this plan any real approval. I am concerned with many parts of it, and I'll try to point out just a few. First, public comment is not adequate. I'm not sure how much money was spent to collect the information, but for me, Here's the breakdown in the way I see it. 2 questionnaires. First questionnaire, 2021, 427 total participating. Nearly a third of those were not fully filled out. But the biggest concern, 61% are Troutdale residents. That's like 260 people responding. In 2022, there's 176 people that respond, 25% are partial responses, and 77% are residents. That's 136 people, the way I do the math. So even if we said the people that responded in 2022 are different than the ones that responded in 2021, that's 396 residents. And in our population census, 16,300, that makes less than 2.5% of the residents participating or giving their opinions in this. I would have given mine had I been asked, I promise. Okay, that means that over 97.5% of the residents are not represented in this information. That's a big concern. So some of what I'm saying, also, my brother lives in Troutdale, and he and I chatted about this, and he's like, oh my gosh, and he has so much to say about it too. But so then that leads into just looking at one of the numbers I was looking, page 41. There's listed 13% of the people are interested in more gathering areas. So if I do the math on that, that's like 0.3% of Troutdale residents care about that. Please don't spend money on things that we don't all want, or at least a real majority. It's not a good representation. And I'm not really sure their structures would get maintained. They'd probably just be vandalized. Okay, the next thing I'm concerned about is that 40-mile loop. It's a bad idea. I think there's been comment on it, and I know people want it, and I get the idea. I'm a bicycle rider. I love the idea of having a smooth way to ride through things, avoiding traffic. But I also know with Portland comes a ton of problems, a ton of hot mess, and I don't want the homeless highway having an easier way to make it out here. I don't even ride my bike on Marine Drive anymore because that is such a mess. And that stretches out to a point where I just don't want it. Please, please, please don't make things such a thoroughfare to bring that in. Okay. It's also pretty expensive, and that concerns me in my pocketbook. Which leads me into the parks budget. Page 54 talks about 13% increase the last 2 years and a proposed 42% increase. That deals with FTE. Honestly, I would love to have a parks audit. I apologize if I'm offending somebody, but I'd like to have the audit of the work done where, when, every day of the year. Because I go places and I see things neglected, or I say, wait a minute, he said he was going to be here and he's not here. I wonder why. So I say that because that has been my experience. Okay, and last I'm going to end with, I heard mention of the Beaver Creek a little bit, but when I looked through a lot of the documents, I'm not sure how much that's really put in there. I find it amazing. 2 major neighborhoods got disconnected when the bridge got taken out. And I realized it had gotten more dilapidated. It had been neglected. I get it. But it got taken out and it completely separates. There's no way to traverse to that other neighborhood. And to me, that's like should be one of the top priorities, is getting that bridge back in there. All right. And again, I think I'm asking for you guys to be reasonable planners and responsible spenders. That's it.
Shelley Reynolds.
Shelley Reynolds. I'm also Troutdale, Oregon. Really very close resident to Llewellyn Park. I'm also a member of the Parks Advisory Committee. I'm speaking here tonight, making a statement on speaking only for myself, not for the Parks Committee, But I am making the statement based on my experience with the Parks Committee. And before I go any further, John Venus, thank you so much for your hard work on this project. It has been a pleasure working with you. And congratulations, you all got a fabulous new member in Zach. So prior to the Parks Master Plan being considered, I would like to ask that if you haven't already looked at some of our conversations in depth at the Parks Advisory Committee and reviewed our minutes and some of the meetings there, that you consider doing so. There was a lot of back and forth discussions. There are aspects of this plan that the committee did not discuss or approve. I felt that our work on this plan had met its expirations as the projects that we were most passionate about and felt would benefit Troutdale the most were all included in this plan, including the Beaver Creek Bridge. I think that if you think the Parks Advisory Committee should approve every aspect of this plan, you should send it back and not expect any kind of expiration date on it, because it's a huge plan and I just don't think that we could review every aspect of this plan and provide you input on all of it. When we began this project, I understood that it was a 20-year plan, which that being my understanding, of course, influenced our conversations and the things that we felt were important. With that in mind, we did not consider budgetary information as a valuable consideration, as what it costs today is not what it's going to cost in 5, 10, or 20 years from now. We did not review or consider budgeting numbers in the plan, and again, because this is a 20-year plan, question how accurate those numbers can be. I believe that considering future funding any future project at this time is fairly premature. There's at least one project in the plan, although it is couched in very big language, which is the 2nd Street Bridge. That's not something that we advocated for. It's not something we wanted included in the plan, but somehow it just kept making it in there. And because it's also in the transportation system plan, we kind of gave up that fight and decided to move on. In my opinion, the Parks Advisory Committee chose and supported the projects that would most benefit Troutdale residents and contribute to our quality of life. Being a very close resident to a park, it's absolutely vital that we get the community input. Unfortunately, it sounds like some community members don't feel like they did, but having spent the last couple of years working on this, I can tell you that getting community input on anything can be a serious challenge here. It's just not easy. And John went above and beyond trying to get people's input and approval on this plan. So thank you for your time and your consideration of this project.
Thank you. Adrian.
Thank you, Commissioners. Two things very quickly. I'll keep this brief. One is, oh, sorry, my name is Adrian Kester, resident on 4th Street over there. And primarily because the Helen Althouse Park is right outside my back door. The trail going into it runs right past my front door. The two things I want to highlight is I concur with the conclusions that maintenance does need to be a top priority. To be perfectly frank, when I saw Helen Althouse included in the list of developed parks, I did have to kind of chuckle just a little bit because the vast majority of it certainly isn't. And it is in dire need of maintenance, as are many of our parks. So the idea of maintenance and improvements to existing parks, I wholeheartedly agree with. The other point I want to make, and this comes from my experience living in other medium and large metropolitan areas around the world is that if you want to have safe trail systems that are used and enjoyed by the public, connectivity is absolutely essential. If you have trails that go nowhere and don't connect to each other, they will become the dumping place for people, for things, and bad things will happen. If you want safe, open, pretty trails, they have to get used. And if you want the trails to get used, they have to go somewhere and they have to connect to surrounding communities. We need trails that connect to the gorge. We need trails that connect south, all the way to Lake Boring, to Gresham, to Southeast. If we want a good, solid trail system the public uses, they have to be connected. So anyway, that's my piece. Thank you very much.
That was all public testimony.
That's it. Any comments?
Want us to try to respond to some of these? I don't think that's,
No, I just wondering if you had any.
no, I don't.
Okay. All right. We've all gone through this one. A lot of work has gone into the plan. No doubt about that. Is there a particular document that anyone wants to look at first? Start with that. Yes.
So I was curious about doing some discussion on future parks.
Okay.
Because I know that we're talking about upgrading our existing parks as a primary park.
Mhm.
But what happens is sometimes opportunity doesn't come along when we want it to. Yeah, sometimes opportunities go away. So, and there are some areas where as we build out, we're going to have some areas that are built out without parks. Although I can see that we're doing a lot better than many of the surrounding communities. So I'd be interested if there's any discussion amongst the committee on future parks and underserved areas.
On this committee.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Can you repeat that last bit of the question?
So if you look at the map, let's go to what, page 45. We're looking at, yeah, it looks like you have it. We're looking at where our park system improvements should be. And it looks like they've done a good job of identifying their areas. One thought that I had is when I'm at work, sometimes you just gotta get away for a little bit, right? And the park is a nice, relaxing place to go. You really don't have anything in that nearby zone, which I think is something that is needed. And then when you look amongst where it says NP1, I would agree that if there's a target of opportunity around there, park in that area. I mean, have you ever gone back to places you used to live as a kid? Right?
I try not to.
Well, you go back to places you used to live as a kid and all these vast open areas that used to not have any which is now packed with houses. And if nobody had the foresight to actually pick a parking area, you wouldn't have it. So that's where I'm, and so those two areas, and then of course the south end of town, if there's something we should be doing there. Because I do see that someday Troutdale is going to move south. That's our growth area.
Or something's gonna move south.
Yeah. It's a matter of time. It'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense based off of the data that was gathered and discussed by the Parks Advisory Committee that those areas would ideally service the underserviced area of town. I think it's kind of the idea. What you're specifically saying is also thinking about further north with enterprise area for like workplaces typically.
Yeah, you know, kind of a peaceful place you can go, sit down, maybe eat your lunch, kind of wind down, because when you're working in these kind of industries, they don't give you a lot of time. You don't get a lot of time to escape, so you're certainly not going to travel very far from the park to kind of wind it. I kind of wish we had something in there. I was looking at the map.
There's an 80-acre wetland up there with that count.
If you have a bench or something that people can sit down and watch it. What's that?
The wetland up there.
I mean,
Can you make any use of it whatsoever, or is it just a limits?
so my guess is that'd be something that you could recommend to forward to have a small seating area or something like that. I think that's reasonable. I mean, it's a little bit more budget, but I think it's a minor ask for potentially an asset to the community. I think your notion of having places where people can gather regardless of where they live and, to your point, where they work is
Right.
important.
Mhm.
So I could see that being reasonable ask.
Anything else?
On other subjects, yes, not on this particular subject, so if there's someone else in turn. Oh, I did want to mention that, the bridge. Council approved the bridge to be repaired back when I was on council. It's been years. So, yeah, I should be getting to that.
So I think it's just been something that just hasn't come together. The funding's been there for a number of years, but I think because of grant funding, which is part of it, and our ability, all of those pieces just haven't come together.
Yeah, that is correct, and it is a priority. It's a priority of the city manager for sure, and I think it's frankly been charged as of this week to sort of kind of get that more moving. Frankly, I have to get up to speed on it a little bit more,
Right.
but there is funds set aside, and I believe there's a study going on to figure out what is the appropriate bridge given the area, type of thing. So,
there's some renewed interest. in-
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's more than that. It's kind of one of those things that just needs to kind of move forward. Yes.
It's on the front of the stove, and I think the
Yes.
burner's on medium high right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's not boil. Sorry, but yeah, I'm glad you're looking into that.
Yes.
Being a long-term resident of Troutdale, we bought our house back in 1971. In our community, the person that built out that and planned that community, planned for that little park that's sitting there. It has a basketball, one big basketball court, it has things for kids to play on, it has a swing set, it has all the amenities. But it came through cooperation with the developer of that whole piece of property. So sometimes in collaboration with development, you might give a little piece of property to let them have something like a little more density. But they also help put a park in that would not be there. Same with Cannery Park. It just has benches. A lot of people kids sit there and have their lunch that come from the high school. Will sit on that bench and have their lunch there. But it just has benches. I mean, it doesn't need to be a lot. But when you plan the development, that is gonna have to be part of that conversation, I think.
That seems to work well for the smaller parts.
Right, but, and the bigger parts are another issue, but again, like in the industrial area, I walk down there by the airport.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people down there that would like to have something to sit on, just so they can enjoy the geese and the different types of birds and the wildlife that go through there, including the coyotes. I do see them pretty regularly. But it's a nice quiet place. You can watch the airplanes, you can watch helicopters, get a whole new perspective of,
Unwind.
and unwind and see north of Troutdale. You see Mount Hood, you see Watch Mountain, you know, just kind of a quiet, not real quiet, but quiet.
I appreciate you having your personal experience in there.
People know me now. Because it's awful, because I'm always down. But it's a nice place to walk.
So since we're talking about new parks, I guess we'll just stay on that subject. We talked, I saw about a park on possibly on Stark. And I was wondering where that location would be. And with the Streeton property, that's a master plan development. I think there was going to be a park in there. Did we consider that when we were looking at?
You're right, it's not on the map. Is it?
No.
But it's
I'm
part
gonna
of
bring John into the mix.
Sure,
Don't mean to put John under pressure here, but John, did you hear the question?
I did. Can you repeat the location of that?
Yeah, it's Troutdale Road and Stark.
Or by CP1.
Yeah.
It would be across and south of CP Park.
Yeah, it's kitty corner to the college park that's there
And
now.
I think in the future plan, it was supposed to be in the back part of the property, like towards that intersection you're talking about, Stark and Troutdale Road.
Right.
I believe that was supposed to be like commercial, and then you had higher density and lower density as you go back, and then there's supposed to be a park back there.
So is the question, just to make sure that John is
Park is
getting us.
missing some plan.
Oh, excuse me, sure. Is the question, so John can respond, is what was driving that park location? Is that?
Yes, and then off of that is, do we consider that we were planning for a park in that development when we're looking at adding the park?
So John, go ahead, and then I have a comment too.
Well, I'm not sure if I know. I got the location. I guess a couple of things, and this may not answer your question fully, so please clarify if this isn't getting to your question. But I think the two things are the three circles that we have on the map, on the future system map. Those were the priority locations based on our analysis showing where the underserved areas of the city are. So those are those kind of places that don't have good access and places that met kind of those indicators that we looked at for demographic information. So those are those sites that we identified. There's also a couple of different policies on page 15 for nearby park access, page 37, quarter to half mile access for parks. So I think the goal was to identify these three specific sites that we have shown that are on this map. And I think, as I heard, looking at opportunities as they come up, when they do, they may not be shown on this map, but if they meet that policy about filling in those gaps, those underserved areas, if that's an opportunity, the policy is in the plan to pursue potential acquisition, maybe it's dedication, maybe there's a development that takes place on that site. So there's kind of a safeguard that meets what I think I'm hearing to provide that opportunity to go after some of those opportunities as they come up, and these three search areas. But I don't know if I got your question answered all the way.
Does that help, Chair? Or,
It does.
okay. And I guess I would sort of ask is, when you were mentioning a park, the park that you were mentioning, was that part of a private development that the city was imagining? That's how I understood you say it, versus a public park, which is what I think the master plan is describing. And I think I understood your
It
question.
would be a public park as
Okay.
part of the development,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, dedicated.
There's plan of the, I think, back in this area here, where your higher density is up here, and there was going to be in the back here. But it was going to be a different type of park, I thought, than what's close by there, Santa Palisades.
Yeah, I'm old, my memory's not that good.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say, John, that that what planning commission and city's been thinking aligns with the analysis that you did that suggested that there's a need in this area without necessarily getting site specific, that it's right here? Is that a fair way to summarize?
I think so. Yeah, I think the benefit with this plan is flexibility in those sites coming up. If there's an opportunity, if there's a property owner or development, it gives you the flexibility to get to that level of detail. These kind of circles are really intentionally high level to focus somewhere in that area. That's that vicinity, the neighborhood park, half quarter mile community park, a little bit bigger search area, but it gives the city some flexibility in looking for something that meets the design development guidelines for a park within those search areas.
Okay. Anyone else on the fence?
No.
All right.
Commissioner Stephenson,
Yes.
we did have public comment on trails. Do you want to discuss that at this time?
Yeah, let's talk about trails here a little bit.
Mind if I make a comment?
You may do so, sir.
So back when we were looking at the 40-mile route, this was a much different area. So I can feel for the person that was commenting that I think we can all agree that Portland is not quite the attractive place it used to be back when we were first thinking about this. And I'm sensitive to that. And sensitive to the comments that the public comment brought up. And I wonder if there's some discussion around that in this commission. Do people have thoughts on that?
About trail.
Yeah, so like if you look at the T1 trail, on the T1 trail, that's the completion of the 40-mile route. Also with its companion part of the trail, the north of Troutdale. So do we take the T1 trail up to the freeway and stop, or do we go all the way through and complete the 40-mile loop? You might want to think about that for the reasons that people brought up. We're running into trail systems people can't actually use or feel safe using these days, just because the social issues that are going on.
Fine. So Zach, I would just say on that note that to refrain from completing a lot of trail loops and kind of looking at the bigger picture for kind of what's going on currently may not necessarily be advantageous when there are other solutions that we can work to find, especially being kind of at the tail end of the loop, so to speak. In terms of keeping safety, obviously number one priority being a concern. Looking at where the T1 is, you're talking about stopping at the freeway. I mean, that's the start of the confluence site, which is in talks of being developed as well. above that, you know, I think working with other departments and other commissions and wherever is needed, there are solutions there to help, I guess, kind of protect what we have. I think overall, the comments on connectivity of the trails is very important. I will say in relation to public comment, you know, the PAC is essentially in existence to be the citizen's voice for that. That's the whole reason they're there. That's why we have the discussions about it, because they are advocates for the community ultimately. There is a lot of legwork that went into the public comment. I can say just from personal experience, there was a lot of talk on connecting the trails, making sure that that's a big priority. So I would, I guess, hesitate to squash that just because, you know, current economic and social conditions are less than favorable, I'll say, I guess, coming from Portland, when there are potential solutions out there. To continue, I guess my main concern at this point would just be with the Parks Advisory Committee, maybe not feeling like the budgetary aspect of it is aligned. We can circle back to that later, but just on the network trails. Yeah.
Right, and that's what I'm looking for, is good comment. For clarification, the confluence site is just to the south of the freeway.
Right.
And up against the river. Right.
And I would just say, you know, you've got to be really careful here because you've got a 20-year plan. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But along the same lines, I think about the famous meeting at Harvest Church, which is probably the most community I've ever seen anywhere in probably close to 20 years. And really upset about the possibility of the Springwater Trail
Good point, that was there.
being connected. And they literally went nuts and Metro packed up their boards and left. So I see that. And but then also I see, just an example, I serve on a board for the drainage district, and we handle the levee system from here, out here, down to the mouth of the Willamette. But, and one of the things that I found as a board member was our staff said, well, once you connect the 40-mile loop, you're going to be at least $40,000 a year in additional cleanup costs. Because of you've got more people having access. And although I think that's, you know, a temporary situation, I think that since the community first kind of publicly addressed this situation, I think it's actually gotten worse, more than gotten better. And so that is a bit of a concern. And then when I look at these, like T2 kind of goes through a lot of private property. So I don't know exactly what the plan was there, if you're going to acquire it or looking to somehow get that. And then T3 looks to me like it kind of goes down to the railroad track and kind of dead ends there. And I wasn't quite sure what we were doing. I was thinking that we would probably want to utilize the work that's being done on Halsey, right, with a larger right of way, and maybe try to incorporate something from Halsey that comes into town. But I do think trails are important, but I think we also have to be cognizant of what the current issues are and make sure that we address those at the same time as well.
So I mean, with the Parks Advisory Committee, I guess being kind of the reigning body on prioritizing what gets done, I guess, in the plan as we go along for now, that is potentially something that will be phased in later and priority placed on other internal city things or functional city. Right?
Yeah, I think it's more of, yeah, the priority is probably the biggest thing that I think everybody's looking for to come out of this.
And I agree, I think the trail maybe is the last That way we can kind of get everything, the social issues, maybe help out with those more, figure out how to make it more safe, keep it cleaner. And especially for young kids to be able to go with their parents and not have to.
Absolutely.
So that may be lowest on the priority list.
Exactly.
So do we leave that to the Parks Advisory Committee
To prioritize that.
yeah, set priority?
I think we'll ask them that, just get their opinion on it.
Commissioner Stephenson.
Yes.
So for the last 5 years, I pay attention to what's going on in different governing bodies around. And for the last 5 years, I've been seeing decision after decision where you just kind of wince because it's just going to make the situation worse. We've been making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, making problems worse. And it seems to be a cross-country thing. And I do hope that sometime in the next 20 years, that we learn our lessons and start making better decisions to improve the socioeconomic condition within our regions. So I appreciate your comment earlier, but maybe we do hold off on doing it now. And until we do start making those better decisions at the various government bodies.
So can I ask you a question?
You know who we haven't heard from yet? Oh, Commissioner Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair Stephenson.
Do you have any comments other than the ones that you sent in? I'm sure you do.
I'm not sure which ones you're referring to, except the typo corrections. I've got a couple elements that I can't support. One is page 39, there were a reference to camping in Glen Auto Park. By the way, I heard the staff presentation on that at the PAC meeting, and I wasn't buying it at all. Also, on page 54, there's a reference to a maintenance utility fee. I think that's kind of what Gresham did with their public safety fee that they tacked onto their utility bills without voter approval. So those two elements I would not support being retained. So I'd probably be a no vote, on that basis. That's all I have. Thank you.
That's all you got. I'm disappointed.
That's all I got.
Anyone else? I think we want this will page by page. You guys might want to. So I have a question on the maps. We've got the northern section there, that's the industrial zone. If I'm reading this right, it talks about the total number of residents being up to 306.
In the industrial zone,
Yeah,
John?
Can you repeat that again? So you're saying that there's a statistic in here about residents in the industrial area? Is that
Yeah.
right?
What page you on, Tammy?
I'm on page 26. I don't think there's anybody up there.
I was wondering the same thing. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I think the only reference I'm seeing is on the page 25 on the third bullet point paragraph to the right, looking at households. There's the statement that there are no residential uses within that area, but I mean, maybe if you can specify where you're seeing that other figure.
I'm just looking at the color-coded map is all.
Oh, I see. Yes, so I can explain that one. These census block pieces of information, as I mentioned, when we were doing the analysis, that is the kind of the smallest geographic entity that we can drill down to with census data. So with the, demographic characteristics. The census block in that area, in the industrial area of the airport, it's a big one. I mean, you can see it extends beyond the city's city limits, urban growth boundary.
Mhm.
What that is picking up on, there's a small pocket of, I believe it's a manufactured home park just outside of Troutdale. I believe it's maybe in Wood Village. So it's picking up on that, and it's making that whole census block show the same color. So to clarify these maps, when we looked at that, that was one of the first things we picked up on, which is why we say in the narrative that accompany these maps, that's an anomaly basically in the analysis. So essentially, we didn't find in that particular map low income population in Troutdale. There's essentially no residential that we could find in that area. It was picking up from a outside residential use outside of Troutdale.
Okay. I was looking at level of service. It looks like, we're right 4.4, looking to get to 5.2. And if we add in the natural areas and those things, I think we were like at 11.5 per thousand. And I think that the baseline for that's between 10 and 15. Do I have that right?
Say it again, Chair. I'm
So
sorry.
like if you put all the land in, the open areas and all that, I think you get like 11.5 acres to 1,000. And I think the goal is to be like between 10 and 15. Have that right?
Yeah, I can clarify that. So the current city standard comes out of the 2006 plan. The city has 3 goals for parkland level of service. So 0.01, 0.1 for mini parks and special use sites, 1.8 for neighborhood parks, and 3.3 acres per thousand for community parks. So the total current standard level of service is only for developed parks, and it's 5.2 acres per thousand. So assuming if you added the natural areas, that would, put that number even higher.
Right. And then I think the quarter mile is great. That's pretty good because I think Portland's at like half a mile. So I think that's a good goal for us to be at.
Chair Stephenson.
Yes, Commissioner Allen.
So, did we pick up on any cultural desires? So some cultures don't have a large enough voice to actually be heard as well as they should. Did we pick up in all the discussions that we had and the surveys that we've done? Were there any identified cultural desires that we're just totally missing out on? Certain types of play fields, certain types of events.
I don't know.
John, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, of course. So one thing, and I think this gets back to one of the concerns that was raised earlier about who we heard from, local residents versus folks that live outside or say they live outside of Troutdale. One of the things that we did was look at comparisons to statewide data, statewide trends. The statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, SCORP for short, is the state of Oregon's version of this type of plan. It's the Parks and Recreation Plan essentially for Oregon. And that plan actually drills down to regional level. So we look at Portland metro area, for example, look at Troutdale. So we compared what we heard from in community outreach results with information such as the SCORP data. And the SCORP data is great because it has all sorts of surveys. They do surveys with community members. They do surveys with park providers, so cities, park districts, counties, so forth. And one of the ways they look at that data is by race, ethnicity. And so one of the things we heard from in Troutdale was gathering, picnicking, places to be with families, with friends. And we heard that locally. That's also one of the top priorities, key needs at the SCORP level. So looking at regional data, which Troutdale is a part of, that also rose to the top. So essentially we can compare what we heard from Troutdale, especially communities of color, with what we see with statewide data, regional data, to compare those two. So that is a big one. Walking trail use is a huge one. And that's across most demographics, but especially communities of color in particular, having places to go out, walk, bike. But I'd say the social gathering aspect is a huge one, and that one rose to the top.
May I expound a little bit further too? So I appreciate the answer, and that's what I was looking for. So we were initially raised poor, and we didn't have money to go places and do things. It was pretty much free parks or free trails is all we had, and that was going to be it, right? And so do we have a good feel? Are we meeting those needs as well? People who may not have as much disposable income as others, or their needs being met?
Yeah, affordability is a big one. I'm glad you raised that point. So we looked at free, low-cost options. Parks obviously provide that. You walk down your street, you don't really need any equipment. You've got some opportunities just down your neighborhood. So that's where I think places to gather, picnicking, picnic shelters, those all come up. Having somewhere to go if you have a group activity. We talked a lot with Molly, looking at recreation programs that the city offers. And granted, they're not a comprehensive list of offerings that the city provides, but partner organizations, contractors that provide opportunities here. That's definitely something that we heard a lot about. And we have in the plan some policies and recommendations around making sure these opportunities are affordable. Or if there is something that is, at cost, there's an option for a affordable, applying for something that's affordable, providing some of that affordable options across the board. So it's more of a parks and recreation facilities having access to, no cost opportunities, and then also the programming side having little to no cost opportunities as well.
Yeah, so the reason why I bring it up is so many municipalities are searching for ways to charge for this or that. I'm afraid that those that are have less disposable income are going to run out of options, places to go and things to do. So I want to be sure that we are sensitive to that, and that we are having like picnic areas that are low cost or no cost. Something to keep in mind.
Most of the time, all the park and recreation stuff is down at Glen Park. So My concern is that most people can't get to Glen Island Park, or that there's no parking at Glen Island Park, basically.
That's a good one.
So my question would be for Parks and Recreation, if they could do like satellite recreational events at all the little parks that service the rest of Troutdale. Like they have those pop-up stores and stuff. This could be like just at one park, or, where you bring big chessboards, a lot of chessboards for kids to try chess, or something that.
Kind of
you
like
could get-
pop-up programs.
Right, pop-up programs that are notified through public outreach, so that the local area doesn't have to travel clear to Glen Island Park to participate.
That's a good point. Very good idea.
Chair, if I may respond to that, and John, jump in if I'm getting off base, but I think the comment is right on. I'm not sure that it really lends itself to a long-range parks master plan. However, I believe Molly King is with us this evening. I would suggest, those are great suggestions. We would love to come back to you and talk to you about those types of programs.
But again, it goes to affordable.
But to your point,
Yeah.
Commissioner, creating that variety in different places in the community and pop-ups, I think it's something that in my conversations with Molly, I think she would be interested in hearing and having a conversation with you. Molly, I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but.
But it also goes to maintenance too. If the park isn't maintained, nobody's gonna come either.
Which,
So,
fair enough, which is why the master plan sort of prioritizes that.
Commissioner Prickett, if I may add, there may be some facilities or
right,
investment needed to help facilitate such things.
right,
And that's where it matters here,
right.
if we have to make changes.
This is John. If I could jump in too, just to clarify, a couple of points I just wanted to make sure folks realized. The first is, great observation around, distributing opportunities throughout the city. Obviously, mobility is an issue. Not everybody can get around the same way, especially if it's in one location in the city. So we do have a recommendation. It's on page 38. Specifically calling out programming sites throughout the city. We talk about events, mobile outdoor games, movable interactive art pieces, and so forth throughout different locations. And to provide a little bit more detail, this was something I know the Parks Advisory Committee honed in on, is doing what we have with what exists. So in particular, some of the mini parks that Troutdale has, there are a handful of mini parks, really small sites, really challenging to add anything, and actually places you wouldn't want to invest a lot into. But the Parks Advisory Committee was really saying, hey, let's take advantage of these. Let's use what we have. And so you'll see that in the plan, specifically Cannery Park, CP Park, and Sweetbriar Park. All these, really small sites, but they're publicly owned. They're green spaces. These are good opportunities to add some of those, distributed programs, games, movable art pieces, and so on. One other point I wanted to add too, we also have a recommendation about any future reservable picnic shelters, that those are offered at a no-cost basis to the community.
Commissioner Stephenson?
Yes.
Chair Stephenson. Okay, so two brain cells started talking to each other. I think that park that we were talking about earlier, on just off of Troutdale Road and Stark, I think that was supposed to be playfields way back when, in earlier discussions.
Okay. All right. I want to get into run through some questions about the goals and objectives. You guys want to take a break first? Is good. You guys okay with that? Your goals and objectives? Okay, I had a a couple of questions or suggestions. One, when I look at the goal 2, community involvement and stewardship, 2.8, strive to have parks and recreation staff and volunteers that are representative of the city's diverse demographics. Are we trying to dictate who gets hired? It just kind of feels like we're telling staff what they have to do. I don't know, that's how I felt when I read it.
I feel like it's more of a, I think kind of just inclusive phrasing to where it's taking that into account when it comes to making sure that people feel like they're contributing from all demographics that were surveyed in all areas. That's how I'm thinking.
Okay.
But
I think staff would concur with that. And, I'm trying to say, okay, it's not in any way or form trying to be top down. Suggesting that. I think the key word is the word suggesting there. It's not intended.
Okay. And I want to go back one to goal 1.17, allowing for on-leash dog access to parks as well as off-leash. Do we not allow dogs in any of the parks now?
City parks, right there.
Dogs are pretty Yeah.
Sunrise Park is on leash only, and after the mayor's proclamation that Troutdale is a dog-friendly city, we are slowly turning the parks over to pets on leash only with responsible owners. And we're slowly doing that. And I've got hundreds of emails of thanks that we're slowly starting to do this. And I'm working with the city manager on the verbiage to come to the council to have 3 words taken out of it and 3 words replaced, which pets are allowed on leash, not allowed on leash.
Okay.
So that's under in the works.
Okay. Thank you. And then identify on goal 3.1, identify areas of environmental significance, wetlands, sensitive species, and habitat to be fully protected from development. Is that a planning thing more than a parks thing?
Planning thing more than a parks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to distinguish the two. I think they're, I mean, anything more than a parks thing.
If I could add, this is John again. I think the intent of this objective is really speaking to goal 5 of the city's comprehensive plan, which is understanding the inventory of these areas, environmental areas that we have called out here. So I think this is just a continuation of, with this process, we're recommending an update to goal 8, recreation needs. But this is another recommendation that at the time the city does an update of its goal 5 inventory as part of its comprehensive plan to make sure this is something that's included and called out in this parks plan. So identifying areas of environmental significance, making sure that's documented and inventoried in the comprehensive plan.
So that'd be like publicly owned land, right? Yes. Yeah.
Typically, that is the case. Yeah.
Okay. And then connectivity goal 4, 4.2, explore opportunities for trail connections, 40-mile loop. That was one that already came up. And 4.3, I just personally, the wording, we're connecting the community and neighborhoods with higher populations. And then we say of people of color. I don't find why we need to say that. I guess it's kind of like connecting them, we're connecting them. We should be doing it for everybody. Just an opinion. And then the other one I was wondering about was 4.4, pursue an easement acquisition for the Beaver Creek Trail connection to Glen Auto Park. So we're looking at connecting from Glen Auto to the linear park.
That's correct. Yeah, so that the intent of that objective would be to have a connection for those two systems.
And I apologize to Amy, I just don't know all these things.
That's all right.
Getting up to speed, but there was yes.
So we're trying to connect those, okay. And then 4.5 was explore options to create a trail from 257th to Western City Limits along the top steep slope areas south of Halsey. And so were we doing something on the, just on the top, or were we doing something on the bottom too? I didn't know.
John, did you hear that?
I did, yeah. This was a conversation that we had with planning staff earlier on, looking at opportunities for connectivity. So that would be correct. The idea would be to have that connection at the top of that slope. So that's also referenced in map 3, the trails and connectivity map.
Okay. And then on goal 5.1, involve indigenous people, people of color, and other underserved communities in planning, design, decision-making process related to parks and recreation system. I was just wondering if we couldn't say involve all citizens in the design, decision-making, planning of parks. Unless it's important that we, for some reason, that we spell that out.
Well, I think John spoke to it, let me jump in, but I just think that I think it is important that it's spelled out. I think that one of the goals of the plan was to consider, and John talked about it, that equity lens. I think we can all agree that that's important, but I think it is also important to spell it out in a little bit more detail, because historically folks have not had a chance to participate with the best of intentions. So I think putting it in there's a reason for it that John talked about, the equity part of the project. John, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you summed up the same thing I was going to say, David. I think we began this project looking at equity to parks and recreation, and I think this is a very critical objective for the city to consider, not just with parks. I think there's a need citywide in any type of planning activity to specifically call out underrepresented populations. So this one is a critical one to include in the plan.
Okay. All right, and then 5.9, incorporate historic and cultural resources and art into park master plans. I was kind of trying to envision what that looks like. How much we're incorporating what we're doing. It's almost like, is it something we're trying to do, or are we dictating it? Incorporate makes me feel like I need to do it.
Yeah, at the master plan level, and maybe the word consider might be better. I'll let John weigh in, but from my experience, kind of to what people were talking about, what can we do in the parks that aren't real big ticket lifts, and incorporating art and stuff like that is one way to get there. It's also a way to engage youth. Historically, it's been a very successful way to bring youth into the fold, to be part of the park system, to take pride in the park system, and hopefully protect the park system. So it's, again, not intended in any way or form to be top down, but more to be informative, kind of in line with larger master plan goals and objectives.
Okay.
Commissioner Stephenson?
Yes, Commissioner.
I kind of pick up where you're coming from, because whatever the socially accepted wording of today is, we've all experienced it, that in the future, it becomes the thing that we learn not to do in the future, right? And so I wonder if we could word it better as to what we're really trying to do, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get groups that may be underrepresented, that were considered a voice, right? That's what we're really trying to do. Whatever group that may be, and whatever group that is today may be different tomorrow. This is a 20-year plan. What's it going to look like in 20 years?
Right.
So what we're trying to capture is underrepresented groups need to be considered in the improvements that we make, so their voices don't get drowned out. And it just seems like there could be a better way of stating that. That's more future-proof.
I would say that the wording is fine. It encompasses the groups today. If it needs to change as we go along, that's the beauty of this, we can adapt it, but realistically, it says other underserved communities. It's just broad, sweeping, I think, all-inclusive phrasing that should stay.
Are we referring to like on page 19, 5.1?
Yeah.
As an example?
Yeah. If that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. It just seems like we could future-proof it more, because we know things that will change in the future.
I apologize, I want to go back to one, goal 3.9, increase tree canopy coverage through street tree planting and park tree planting events, target to increase 30% or more tree canopy by 2040. Can we actually do that?
Well, again, it's a target. So I mean, it's not, it's not like, it's not, to answer your question, I don't know, but it's a target. And, the tree canopy is, the reason why it's being suggested is because of warming, things of that nature, and, and so that's why it's being suggested as a target. Now, where the target came from, John, do you want to kind of get a sense of where the 30% came from?
Yeah, this was obviously a very specific, I guess, metric for this objective. This was based on a lot of discussions we had with the community that tree canopy is important. That should be carried through in this plan. And so in conversations with city staff, we talked about some sort of a metric as a target. And so the 30% is where that came from. So basically there was the general objective to have something in the plan aiming at increasing tree canopy, and then a more specific target that we developed through conversations with staff.
Okay. Seems to be involved.
I would say if there's any target to shoot for that we don't hit, that might be a good one. More trees, the better, in my opinion. And
Yeah,
when it comes
just-
to the community involvement, I would say that's the main component. It's all based on high priorities for citizenry that we're contributing there.
But I'm just, I guess, thinking, okay, if we're trying to get the tree canopy, of what type of trees are we street tree planting?
I'm sure.
That's my big issue right now, is that the city has a list of trees that are safe to plant, but not always do the developers plant the right tree in that parking strip. I mean, I had to do my research because I didn't want to pay for a new sidewalk 20 years later. So we planted a tree that has a small root system. They get fairly large, but it doesn't uproot the sidewalk. Now, a lot of the areas, they didn't plant the right tree, and so now the sidewalks look like up by the Honda. They're ripping out part of their sidewalks because it's raised the sidewalk. So I think developers need to be, when we do this plan, at some point, they should be advised, this is the list of trees that can be planted in a parking strip, period.
Commissioner, they are told that
But they don't.
pretty black and white. That doesn't mean they always follow it, which is
Right.
why we have code compliance. To come in, I mean, it's not, you know, kind of sort of a blunt tool, it's not
Yeah.
a perfect world, you know,
Right.
but that's why we have it. Because there are.
Oh, I know.
Right, but it is codified, and then the tree list is, you know, I'm guessing, I haven't spoken to Travis about this, but I'm assuming the tree list for trees, for street trees, has been approved in by our public works department.
So you propose, sorry,
Go ahead.
are you proposing that we would change the wording to also include referencing the tree guide from the city?
Right.
Okay.
So I tend to like to see density targets rather than add some factor, right? Because you're gonna run into situations where it just doesn't make sense. You start asking people to do stupid things. So I wish we could have more density targets.
Okay. Do you have a comment in particular to this item?
No, it's just part of what I was reading
Okay.
earlier.
To go back to your 4.3.
Okay.
And could we maybe switch that to underserved communities? 4.3, where it talks about the higher population of color, people of color and low income households.
Was that language that you guys were specifically looking for with that?
Suggesting adding underserved communities, that's
Changing it to underserved,
changing that.
taking out people of color and low income households.
And just underserved communities?
I'm just looking for consistency between. What we talking about, 5.1?
4 point.
No, I understand, I
Earlier we
understand,
talked
but
about
5.1 talks
Yeah,
about,
5.1 is pretty direct.
right, so.
Yeah.
Would you want it, I guess what I'm asking is, would you want to mirror 5? It seems like that he could, to me, it seems like they should be consistent in spirit. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it would make sense to add it, I guess, at this point, if we're keeping it consistent. That way it's, again, broader, if that's what you're looking for.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, here's one of the problems you run into is get situations where people like to overgeneralize, right? And you start facing people of color and low income, and then people will overgeneralize and say, okay, every person of color is going to be low income, and that's just not true. But there are people of low income and there are underserved communities that we do have to care about. We have to take into account. So how do you do it in such a way that you don't end up with any kind of, that you address the problem without future negativity, earmarking? So I like your suggestion for that reason.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on what's being suggested, so the commission can explain it to me, and John, you can weigh in, or at least you heard it.
That we would add underserved communities.
Oh, we're adding to be similar to 5.1, we're adding underserved thing. Okay,
Right.
I'm with you now, thank you.
So it's more
Thank you.
consistent. Then objectives, I had a question, 7.4, dedicate the revenues from disposed properties to improve existing park system and develop parks and underserved. What properties are we talking about? Any city properties? Doesn't specify which properties we should dispose of.
Yeah, I can clarify that. I think with any of these objectives, there's some that are very specific. I think others are, they're fairly general. In some cases, they may be several years down the road. I think when we started this process, we identified a handful of publicly owned sites that maybe were costing the city more maintenance and so forth. And so potential to divest those sites. Those handful of sites that we looked at, it turns out we decided to discussions with the Parks Advisory Committee to keep those sites. I think I mentioned that the mini parks in particular. This one is more of a future objective. If there is public property that the city decides, it's no longer serving our needs, we would rather invest revenue from that site elsewhere. That's the intent of that objective. So this isn't to say that there's any site identified in this plan, but if the opportunity arises, this gives the city the ability to potentially sell or repurpose that site and then reinvest that proceeds into a different opportunity, different site.
So John, are you saying parks specific?
Yeah, and it could be a natural area. Oftentimes there's a remnant parcel from a subdivision that really isn't contributing. It could be totally mowed. There's really no habitat, high quality habitat as part of that, and so that would give the city the opportunity to repurpose, to sell that site. So it just depends on what that site is, but it most likely would be an undeveloped site. I would put it that way.
But not necessarily a park site, just an undeveloped site.
That's correct. Yeah, that's why the term properties is used. So it's could be an undeveloped site. It could be a totally different site as well.
Council might have a heartburn there. Because I think this says that we're dedicating the revenues from any property the city sells, right? That's how I read it. To improving existing park system.
So if a year ago we sold City Hall, they would have gone into this.
That's how I read it, but I could be wrong.
Right.
Is that what you guys were thinking?
I think that was the intent, and I understand the concern. I think in that case, we could change that objective if that's what you're saying. Change that objective to specify, this would be a site within the park inventory, not any city-owned site. I think if that's what you're inferring.
Yeah.
If I may,
Yes.
Chair Stephenson. So there are times in the city where property gets comes within the city's hands because there's lack of taxes, right? And then you end up with this property and you have to decide what to do with it. Does that situation fit what we're talking about here?
Looks like they're currently
Yeah.
what they're suggesting.
You parks guys, is that what you were thinking?
This is about parks.
It's just about
Reference to
parkland.
parks.
So it's parkland specifically.
Park, yeah, I mean, this is all about parks. We weren't going off into other,
Okay,
that was parks is our focus.
So it's specifically disposed parks and recreation properties. That should probably be spelled out.
yeah. So I think if we just change that, that would be easier. Okay. Yes. And then the last one I had a question on was create a priority system for new and improved park facilities, considering the funding sources recommended in the parks plan. We're recommending all of those as being options, right, on the table, that they're possibilities. We're not, it didn't look like we were nailing anything down.
That's a menu.
That's correct.
Okay. And there's been some feedback about possibly narrowing the menu down to like less options. But that's what we're looking at, is like a full menu possibilities to fund parks. Okay.
7.6, it says consider charging a user fee for parking at popular sites during peak summer season. I don't think that, yeah, I understand the issue of parking, but the other part is what the underserved are not gonna be able to pay for parking at high peak summer, and they want to enjoy like Glen Park. If they're gonna have to pay for parking, they're not gonna be able to go down and enjoy the beach.
I
per
think,
se.
yeah, you're right, as it's phrased, right, you're considering your point earlier about affordability.
Right.
I think the idea behind that was essentially non-residents primarily. So people coming in from out of town, it would be free to Troutdale residents. And the idea was to essentially put this on the docket to consider, as it says, that option probably weighed by the committee in the future. So maybe we need to specify the wording a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so, because the way I read it is that I can't go down there without paying parking. But I don't know how.
So consider charging a user fee for non-Troutdale residents at the popular sites or something. Is that maybe something that clarifies who they're kind of?
My issue again would be how would you know? I mean, somebody's gonna have to say, I don't live here. And how would somebody do that? You have to have a sticker or you have to have something.
Right, there are definitely options.
It could be something that could be sought out, you know, and looked at. I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think it should be specific to non-residents.
Okay.
Yeah, if you think about it, the Troutdale residents already paid for the park.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Years ago.
That's true.
The discussions were for an exemption sticker for all Troutdale citizens. You would not have to pay to park if you were underserved, you have finances to pay to park. You don't have to worry about that. You're a Troutdale citizen.
Did you have a comment, Shane?
We were just looking at potentially including a sticker in your water bill, right?
Okay.
So it only went to Troutdale residents. Troutdale residents already do pay to park there. And the idea was to maybe decrease some of the non-residents parking in that area. A lot of them park. What we discovered in our search was that we see a lot of people who are biking from one place to another, maybe going up to Mount Hood. They park there, they get in their bikes, they ride all the way up to Mount Hood. Their car sits there all day long, right? That kind of thing is what we were looking at, maybe trying to curb.
Well, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
I see the point.
Right.
But so maybe we should just put it in and use it for non-resident.
That'd be good.
I like that.
No offense to bike riders.
There are a lot of those. And then I guess a couple of comments further, page 10 for me. Okay, so we've got the full-time FTE, and then we talked down here about 13% increase in the budget. And just from a budgetary standpoint, I went back and looked at a couple of things. And from 2018 to 2021, so in a 3-year period, staff and materials and services, so taking out capital projects and all of that stuff, the budget went up $174,000 for 67%. So I think there's been an attempt to fund it, and I think it was probably underfunded, you know, for a period of time. But I think the city's definitely tried to get underneath it and get ahead of it. And then in 21-22, that last paragraph, fiscal year budget capital improvement projects included the most prominent Beaver Creek Bridge, as well as several items between 6,500 and 61,000. And I think we should just say that the total capital that was budgeted was like 612,000 that year. That included the bridge. Yes, Commissioner.
So you might remember this, reducing the park operations and maintenance. That was done back in 2008 during a recessionary period. And we've just been extremely slow to bring that back. We're inching our way back to where we were in 2008.
Um,
Question for staff, if possible. Was wondering, just given the potential obstacle of the Parks Advisory Committee not necessarily feeling like, or certain members not feeling like they had much oversight on the budgetary portion, since you're proposing, you're recommending that we forward this on. I imagine you guys you poured over all the numbers, given the budget of the city, and went over those numbers and made sure that it made sense.
I mean, again, it's a master plan
Sure.
thing. So what we did is we kind of just come up with what we think is a prudent budget for a 20-year cycle. I don't think we're really spending time looking back to sort of say what we have and what we don't have. In many ways, this is just a tool for continuing the conversation with Planning Commission, City Council, Parks Advisory Group. So what we try to do is just to kind of capture what we thought the cost would be, not necessarily get into a whole lot of detail of what's actually in our bank. I mean, that's why as these projects come up, they would be elevated to Planning Commission, City Council, and then there'd be a more thoughtful conversation. John, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, that's a great description of the process. Essentially, what is in this plan, it's a plan. So this isn't a budget document. So the capital project list for the 20-year period, the short-term 5-year priority project list, that's not a budget. So it would, as David mentioned, anything in this plan to move forward would have to be incorporated into the citywide budget, the annual budget period. So that's why there's quite a bit of flexibility with this document. The Parks Advisory Committee, Planning Commission, it's kind of an ability to choose. City Council choose what projects are ready for funding based on available funding sources and making sure that gets into the budget.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and John, just that John pointed out in his presentation that there's some projects within the 5-year plan that they're already within the CIP and it's already moving forward. So,
Right.
In that respect, there is that kind of that checks and balances, if you will.
Okay, so I guess on that note, I'm wondering if it would, just to ensure that we have, I guess, our current citizen-run bodies that are going to be prioritizing and making that, I guess I would wonder, would it make sense to put that kind of phrasing into the priority system in 7.7 when it comes to like spending the money, ensuring that projects are getting prioritized, et cetera, based on citizen feedback?
Kind of just more of an explanation if
just even, a slight addition to basically have the Parks Advisory Committee being
recommend which projects.
prioritizing this process, essentially. So actively working on what's getting done and like specifying in the document that is the way it's.
I think that makes sense. I'm going to, again, turn it to our consultant, John.
I think that is a perfect addition. In fact, that was the intent of the bulk of that final chapter of the plan. Having that decision-making criteria is exactly what you just described. It's the ability to list out all these different things that the community has identified as being important, but then having that final step, which is exactly what the Parks Advisory Committee has the ability to do, is use the decision-making questions and criteria to then decide, okay, do we move this forward? And if we do, what are some of these things that we need to evaluate? So I think that's a great addition.
And Commissioner, I think that would answer, came a little bit late to the dance on some of these meetings, but it would answer the Parks Advisory Committee's concerns that they're being listened to.
Exactly.
Because in that way, they would have to weigh in as these things come up, as opportunities come up. Okay, that's what, so that's for your.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I like that. Thank you, Commissioner Andrews.
I agree, that's a good idea.
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. And so, here's what I'm thinking is, how do we work this through with the Parks Committee? Do you guys want this back? What do you guys,
We want it back.
yeah, do you guys want this back? Probably not, okay?
You're gonna revise a few things though, right? Few
That-
revisions.
Yeah, that's our plan, is that,
Yeah.
but I want to make sure that anything that we recommend is acceptable to you.
Yeah, so far, everything we've heard.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys want to keep going? Is all right? Okay. Okay, I'm moved on here. I'm clear up to 39 now. And, okay. This one's a little concerning. Bottom paragraph on the left, repurposing the existing picnic area to the south in Glen Park for camping. I'm just saying, it just makes me a little nervous. I think it should be, especially with what's going on today and what camping is, makes me nervous.
I guess what I'd like to say here is that when you say touched on, that's exactly right. I mean, the last meeting is where that was actually brought up, and I think we have it on our agenda to talk about for the next several meetings. I don't think it's
So
anything.
you guys
that-
did this like at the end?
Yeah, I don't think it was anything that was, I think it's included so that it's not, yeah, it's not the baby out with the bathwater, right? That it's in there, it's to be talked about. It might go under,
So, Chair Stephenson, the campground is more of a very, very immature conceptual idea. Through Travel Oregon as grants and different opportunities through that. But there are so many milestones you're gonna have to travel through to make such a dream come true in that area, which might not be able to even come true in that area because of what you were saying about camping. There's so much logistics. So it's just it's an idea for people, maybe in 15 years, you know, like what a plan is. You know, it's something to roll it back to and look at that. Maybe people then would think that, why don't you have it? You know, this is the big thing now, is, you know, like your camper, you know.
So you want more time to develop or deny the idea to chew on?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, it's so
Hence the
conceptual.
word potential.
Yeah.
I just want to mention too, it's not really the traditional sense of camping. It's gonna be more targeted for bikers,
Bikers like.
bicycle camping.
They,
Kind of hiker biker.
yeah, so they could like get a permit or lease or pay for the spot and then move on the next day.
That's not a bad idea.
No.
But so you gotta look at the whole, look at the picture, like all these people at the beach on a hot Friday night, and there's people camping up above. And then you have a group of people having a birthday party for a bunch of 5-year-olds, and all of a sudden, something pops. You know, you're setting the table for problems, I would have to imagine.
It's actually the way I understood it when it was brought to the Parks Advisory Committee was to what folks mentioned, it was an opportunity to kind of build off some of the tourism ideas of cycling and hiking, which is an amazing amenity. People would be, I believe, renting these spaces, so it's a source of revenue. And then, and obviously there's more work that needs to happen. It does provide, maybe some degree of safety and security as opposed to what's happening out there now, which is can wind up being a free-for-all. So you take the space along the river and you kind of set it up and provide some regulation to it. Again, it's in the very formative stages, but that's what this group would be looking at.
So in context, this has to do with the bicycle trail that's going down the gorge. There's been quite a few improvements made over the years. So, yeah, I would agree, maybe keep it as potential.
Okay. Okay, so then I get to the spring water trail connection. And I just wish we could put something in there to somehow leverage that. Where are you, Chair?
Can you point our nose to it?
I'm on page 40, top page, 40-mile loop. Connecting those trails. I know they're important, but I would just, with the issues that we have there, it would be good if we could somehow leverage Metro or the county to take care of some of these social issues that are happening there for completing the trail. That makes sense.
John, do you want to weigh in? Because I think with what comes with the 40-mile loop is a sense of, at least ideally, a sense of security and safety. But I'll let you sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I was thinking the question was more about, and I get the concern around unwanted, undesirable activity taking place on the trail system. I think the other idea that was coming to mind when this was brought up is other potential funding sources that would come with this, specifically federal transportation funding. As a regional trail, as a transportation system that does provide the city with other funding opportunities. And that could be a number of different things, but that could be an opportunity to consider as well with a trail like that. So that's something to consider. I think with any additional amenity, facility, park, we talked about a potential campsite, trail extensions. I think anything that is going to bring a critical mass of people is potentially a benefit. More eyes on the street, more people are surveilling certain areas of the city. That's also a potential benefit. So there are potential drawbacks, but there are also opportunities anytime you're bringing more people into an area, providing more surveillance, feeling like there's a sense of activity where before certain people wouldn't feel safe being there. So that's just an observation.
Now, is there a set of criteria that goes into the 40-mile loop in terms of some of the things you're saying? So is it in terms of, so in order for a segment to be at this stage planned and eventually developed, is there certain criteria that needs to, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is there certain criteria that needs to be met?
I don't have specific information about criteria necessarily, but I think the main one is the city's willingness to have some skin in the game, have that connection. And that's what this parks plan would be doing, is to show willingness, support for those connections. So I think that would be the main one. There are likely others, David. But I think the main one would be acknowledgement, recognition, and support for those connections to happen.
Chair Stephenson, you
Commissioner,
would add in there some statement as to once safety concerns are addressed.
boy, yeah, personally, I just think you need something because I'm familiar with what's going on Marine Drive. And I don't know if anybody else is, but I believe what I've been told is this connection is going to connect that to this. And, you know, I can just tell you that the people that work out there have got real safety and security issues. And I just don't want to see that head here and then us have to deal with it.
I stopped using the first one for that very same reason.
There are parts of the spring water trail I will walk on.
Right.
And it's not necessarily the people, it's how they abuse the sensitive areas of nature that they destroy it, and then we have to go back and try to reclaim
It's not a desirable place to go.
it.
Is that a sensitive one with you guys? Us trying to put in, yes.
If I
Chair
could,
Reynolds?
actually, moving outside of the Parks Advisory Committee, I will tell you that most, if not all of us are opposed to that, by the way. But
Opposed to
the 40-mile loop.
The 40.
Some of that is relating back to the transportation system plan, which I also had the pleasure of reviewing. It doesn't seem to matter how much we push that particular side, it keeps getting added. And I mean, this is one of those perfect circumstances where it feels like the citizens aren't being heard. That how many 200 and some odd citizens that showed up at Harvest Church and said no. I do think that this is a project that absolutely must come with citizen participation and should not be approved until citizens are on board with it.
some of the regional plans. Many no.
Exactly. Yes.
Maybe that should be put in here then, that in order to connect the 40-mile loop, a regional trail gets developed, it has to go through the process of citizens review, not only just citizens, but the CAC on up.
Yep. Sounds good. We'll talk.
Before it's moved to the action plan.
Before it's moved to the action plan.
Absolutely.
I like it.
So then I would maybe suggest in the actual wording of the goals and objectives in 4.2, when it talks about exploring opportunities for trail connections to the region 40-mile loop trail system, maybe adding a caveat with full citizen or committee involvement or something along that nature.
Prior to action.
Yeah.
Prior to moving to the action plan.
Or implementation.
Yeah. That would be a caveat. You catch that?
Catching part of it, yeah. I mean, I caught what I needed to catch, which is that we're gonna tweak 4.2 to sort of reflect that it's citizen participation, involvement, and review. As I said before, it's going to go through Parks Advisory Committee. Now, are we tweaking also a little this on page 40? I'm not sure we need to if it's.
That's a good point.
If it's in 4.2, but
Maybe just putting something in there to be consistent.
okay.
I like it. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's thoughts on that.
And you're also talking about the bridge, is that what you're talking about?
The Second Street Bridge?
Yeah.
You didn't like it?
No.
Well, is that, so that being in the, I mean, it's in the transportation system. plan.
Right.
So I,
It was a moot point. It's in the
This-
TSP.
I guess I understand with the connectivity between the trails and developing kind of like the closed loops and everything that we're talking about, I guess that could be how it's referenced, but I don't.
I think that will take care of itself.
Yeah.
And then we're dialing up 2.5 FTEs. Is that kind of nailing it down pretty good? Do we need to do that? Do we need to say 2.5? Do we need to say increase FTEs to a level to effectively service our parks? Guess I'm asking.
Tim, you want to weigh in?
With the development of the URA property coming on board with the park down there, that will take a full-time employee to maintain that whole area. From the depot park all the way over to the freeway, especially with the type of clientele, other than the people that will be buying houses or buildings over there. You're gonna have a fairly large mess to clean up, which we already are doing right now, even though it's not developed. So that brings in that one, and as you mentioned earlier, we have not had any FTE growth in our department since 2007, when the city had to make some hard decisions and let employees go because of the economy. So we've never grown off of that. So those are very hard numbers for a start to see if that's what we need or do we need more. We do rely on seasonal staffing, you know, during the prime time between May and September, which seems to help, but as towards, you know, just general expansion, those employees will be needed in the next 24 months.
So you're being overstretched, which goes back to some of the citizen comments on we need more attention on maintenance.
Correct.
It's spread too thin.
We have 4 people to take care of basically 278 acres. So we spend the majority of our morning painting bathrooms to get all the time for feeding. We lock them up, and with the weather being the way it is, we've been pretty lucky that the weather's gonna start getting nice again, and we have to open it back up. You will then listen to you, yes. So it is definitely needed.
think keeping an FTE count in there for budgetary concerns, so powers that be understand exactly what's being asked for is useful, as opposed to leaving it sort of open-ended, and Tim's described that the herd.
Right, and
Excuse me, Chair Stephenson, Travis does have his hand up.
I saw that. Mr. Holton, sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair Stephenson. You've moved on a little bit from what I was going to address, but I could also offer a comment on the current topic. I would look at this, you know, again, this is a master plan. We're estimating needs in many areas. That would include necessary FTEs in the future to maintain things. So, you know, 10 years down the road, if we are staffing up, most likely it won't be exactly 2.5. It'll be 2, or it'll be 3. It'll be, again, this is forward thinking. This is crystal ball work. This is a lot of estimating. So I wouldn't get too hung up on 2.5 versus 2.25 or 2.75. That's giving you a basic ballpark figure of about what it's going to take to do this kind of maintenance on these facilities in the future. And then rolling back to the earlier topic about the 40-mile loop, I just want to make sure everyone's aware and doesn't paint with too broad of a brush when we talk about the 40-mile loop trail connections. When you look at T1 and the extension of that trail over to Marine Drive, that train left the station 5 years ago. That project has been in the works for quite some time. There was a couple of years of various negotiations, IGAs, cost sharing agreements, partnership agreements, operation and maintenance agreements. all put in place, and then a couple years of design and right-of-way acquisition that the port and ODOT has already gone through. And this really had hoped to go to construction even 2 years ago, if not for some right-of-way acquisition problems that came up in the Fairview segment. So unless the port runs into another problem, and they are the lead agency on the project amongst about 7 or so partner agencies, including the city of Troutdale, that project could go to construction this summer. I think, casting my mind back to the controversy of the 40-mile loop trail conceptual alignment effort that Metro made several years ago, has been referenced several times. The bulk of the concern was a trail connection from basically downtown Troutdale south to the Springwater Trail. And that's why Metro suspended that process because of the opposition. But the main concern was that trail extending through the neighborhoods, and you don't see that on this plan. What this plan reflects, the only specific segments that are called out on this plan are those segments in North Troutdale, essentially the T1 segment and the extension over to Marine Drive. And again, that's practically ready to go to construction at this point. It's basically a foregone conclusion. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that when you talk about the 40-mile loop and things having to go through various approval process to build this segment or that segment, those segments have already been through all that. And that's already, that's already headed down the track.
So I guess my follow-up question would be, who would maintain the 40-mile loop in Troutdale?
The segment in Troutdale, the existing segment on top of the levee is maintained by the city, as will be the extensions of those segments to connect to the Sandy River Greenway, Park and Trail, and the connection over to basically the city limits, roughly Marine Drive. And that's part of all of the agreements that have already been put in place over the last 5 years.
No, I appreciate that. I really do. It's just, I know what's going on there presently, and it's just a big concern that I have.
Fully understand. I just want to make sure that the commission and the folks in the audience don't misunderstand that that segment is some future idea that will have the opportunity to go through layers and layers of additional public process. It's already been through all of that years ago and has already been advanced practically to the construction stage.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering, the train left the station. I'm just wondering if it can be called back.
Well, if you did, you'd be giving up huge sums of money in federal grants and upending, several years of work by probably 100 people now and multiple agencies and multiple agreements that have been signed by the city. And approved by the city council. When I say signed by the city,
I don't question that. I just, I don't want to get into an argument here. I just know there's some real concern, some real security and environmental issues that go along with it.
completely understand that it's not my intent to be argumentative. I just wanted to make sure everybody understands the status of those segments. They are not just lines on a map at this point. They are very real.
Yeah. Well, it'll be an exciting time.
Oh, we're not going south.
Yeah. Yeah, so I understand the FTE thing. I saw something in here, 134,000 a year. Did I read that right? Something was 100. It's not 1,000 a year that we'd be dedicating. There's a look. I know what I'm talking about.
So which section, which,
There was a request for funding.
I believe this is John. I believe the figure is on page 50 under maintenance.
Okay.
So the figure, well, the table rather, it shows two different numbers. One is average annual maintenance cost. So that's 641,000. That's for all existing parks. And then I believe, Chair, the figure you're referencing, the 104,000, that would be the recommended average annual maintenance cost for the proposed new parks.
Hey, guys, we lost audio on Zoom. If you can hear us.
I'll second that.
I'm guessing that means they may not be able to hear us. And they've disabled chat. I will send a message to Tanny.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I thought that was just me.
Maybe if we all raise our hand, they will realize that they can't hear us.
Good call. Good
Or
call.
vice versa.
Actions. Recognize hand gestures. Nope, I just want the dang. Here we go.
We can't hear you, Tanny, and we're assuming you can't hear us.
I sent a text to Tanny. Let's see if he checks this one.
I see some people running around, so hopefully that's a sign they got the message.
Hopefully. Yeah, they're trying to fix some things. I think it runs out of batteries, the issue. Technology.
Okay, so there's audio.
Can you guys hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is John. I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I like to take credit too.
Okay, that's it.
Well, hey, you were.
Okay,
you
given
participated.
where we're at,
Thank you, Zach.
could we finish this on the 22nd, be okay?
It's your call, Chair.
Would that give you enough time to make the council meeting
Oh, for notification?
in April? Yeah. I think it would.
We're gonna move this to baseball to finish.
No, 22nd of March.
And so sorry, just want to make sure I understand the question. The question is we have to notify that, right? Is that what you're asking?
Right, but I'm worried about, is it getting to council in April?
It's going to council April 11th.
Yeah, so that would give you enough time for that.
Yeah?
Okay, that'd be okay. Is that okay, or do you guys want to keep going tonight? I think we're kind of at the end of the wick here.
I'm ready just to finish it. I know. That's me.
Chair Stephenson,
Yes.
I know you're very well thought out, and I always appreciate what you have to say. And so I would be fine with coming back on the 22nd.
Okay. Everybody should be mute.
I agree.
Okay.
Why is it doing that?
Is that better? Now muted, but nobody can hear. I think we're still having issues. Okay. Would that be acceptable to everybody?
I'll have to rearrange my schedule, yeah.
Okay. That'd be all right. Okay, so we'll continue this on the 22nd.
Okay.
Okay. Of March, in 2 weeks. And it shouldn't take us very long to get this done at that time. We've done the hard part. Sorry, Zach. Okay.
Did we get Paul's opinion?
Oh, yeah. Paul? Commissioner Wilcox, there you are. Sorry. We would like to continue this on the 22nd, just because of the time of day and the technical issues we've been having.
Okay, it's up to you.
That'd be all right with you, sir?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay, with that.
Happy about it.
Okay.
Sure.
You're up.
Oh, well, staff doesn't have any additional comments, so we'll be ready to go on the 22nd.
Okay. I just have one thing. The TCAB will be meeting tomorrow evening in this room, and they're looking at 3 proposals for the confluence area, and it's a very exciting time. I think there are 3 great proposals, and it's going to be really cool to see how this all goes forward. Many of us have been looking at that for a long time. So if you're interested, tune into that meeting tomorrow night.
What time?
7.
Okay.
Yep.
It's at 7. All right, and with that, I guess we'll go around quick.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, we're gonna go this way. 2, we need to speak up because people that are in the audience can't hear us.
Right.
So either get better microphones or closer microphones to everyone.
Okay.
And we speak louder so that we can, so everyone can hear.
So we're having issues. Okay.
Yes, we're having issues.
Okay.
And then number 2 is whoever owns the property across the way, they're responsible for the sidewalk on 257, getting it shoveled, never got shoveled. And it should have been shoveled
Be this property here.
right across the way here.
The county didn't shovel the
Nope.
sidewalks?
And the people that have wheelchairs and crutches or could not, it was impassable. You just couldn't, I wouldn't even walk down it.
Okay, good to know.
Oh, we're going this way? All right. So Vice Chair Prickett, the reason I was feeding you to the wolves
Oh, no.
is,
What are we gonna do? Okay, go ahead.
well, it was because the mechanics of chairs, of chair, there's lots of people to help, but you have a good heart and you have a broad experience being on this commission. So I'm happy that you're willing to take that position.
Thank you.
I know it's kind of thrust upon you, but you seem to seem to be accepting it.
Yeah. Tell they have to do it, no.
Well, we're all here.
Okay,
We're all
you
here to
guys will help me, right?
Yeah, but you're going to do great. You have all the good qualities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I just wanted to, again, thank John and the Parks Advisory Committee for all the work they did on this proposal, and I'm looking forward to getting this wrapped up next time around. Thank you, guys.
Okay. I want to echo that. I want to thank the Parks team for all that they've done, and just please be patient, work with us through this so that we can, turn the best thing over that we can. We want you guys to be proud of the work that we do here at planning. Okay. So thank you for being here, and hopefully you can come back and we can finish this thing off in short order in 2 weeks. Okay. And David, thank you for all the work that you put into this.
Thank you, Chair.
It's like you're going off the deep end of the pool here a little bit.
Well, I got a good team, so thank you.
All right. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
And move that we, Paul, this Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Wilcox, I keep forgetting you tonight. I'm sorry.
Easy to do when I'm not there. I'd agree with both of Commissioner Prickett's points that sidewalk by the county property's still got a snowdrift on it. That's all I have.
Good point. Okay, thank you, sir. With that, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's see if I can read it.